First, the students looked at the displacement of the Bajau people on the island of Davao in the Philippines, which coincided with an exhibition at the Samsag Museum by the artists, the Aquilillans, who were using recycled materials and especially cardboard boxes, because they have a history of travel, to reconstruct the similar types of dwellings that the Bajau people live in, because they live in these little shanty type huts above a coral reef on the edge of the sea as they've been displaced. So the students were then asked to use local recycled cardboard and materials and masking tape and toothpicks and some bamboo skewers to reconstruct their favourite dwelling, a dwelling that meant something for them and maybe was their dream home or something that they thought that the Bajau people could live in themselves. So once the students have done that over a few lessons, we then had a look at how people have a sense of place and a sense of belonging. So the students were asked to design their own types of maps that meant something to them, that were either the local BMX track or mind maps that they could remember things from, the school route that buses took to get them to and from school, a daily time map of it takes me this long to have breakfast, this long to have lunch, in between what am I doing. We also looked at Catherine Harmon's You Are Here book to give the students lots of ideas, and other artists who use maps in their artwork such as Matthew Cusick and people of the like. Once the students had a fairly good handle on what they were being asked to do as far as creating a map, we then referred to the rubric, which required students to have a minimum of 10 different symbols in a key if they wanted to get an A in their final work. Students already knew that we were going to be moving on to dot painting, because that was obviously the title of the topic. So once they constructed these maps in their book and coloured them in the tones that they thought they might use in the painting, we then had a look at how Aboriginal people actually use dot painting as maps to signify their country and waterholes and tracks and their area of land that belongs to them. The students were then asked to transform the drawing that they'd done into other type of iconography that they could then use in a dot painting. So before commencing the dot paintings, we watched a series of Aboriginal artists on YouTube actually using dot painting in their work and looking at how they did the underpaintings, how they used the line work, how they actually applied the dots. We're all very surprised at how fast they apply the dots, but the students realised that in order to meet the rubric, one of the things was to have consistency in the dots and even spacing and things like that. So we had to all slow down a little bit and take our time to get an even spread. So then we watched a video called Mr. Patterns about Geoffrey Barden going to Papunya Tulia, where a lot of the Aboriginals had been herded into a reserve at the time, waiting for them to die off. What Geoffrey Barden did was have a look at how the Aboriginal people used their sand drawings and their body painting, and show the Aboriginal people and talk to them about transforming those that iconography onto boards with acrylic paint. Hence was born one of the greatest movements of the 20th century, the Western Desert dot painting movement. This is fantastic for the students to be able to watch this resource, because what it also showed them was that Australia's White Australia policy and how they displaced the Aboriginals from their lands allowed the students to actually look at first-hand Super 8 video footage showing the Aboriginal people and how they're actually housed and what it looked like on the reserve and what the conditions were like, and it spoke about how they were all put in this place and they had nothing to do. There was just boredom, hour after hour after hour of doing nothing. So it tied really well with what we started the unit with, which was talking about the displacement of the Bajau people of the Philippines. Okay, so after you've primed the canvas with your white, or primed your craft paper, you need to use a very dark tint as an underpainting. So either a really dark blue, a dark purple, a dark green, a dark brown, depending on the subject and the map that you've chosen. It doesn't necessarily need to match the overall theme. What you're trying to do is get something to underneath so that you can actually pop the colours once we start doing the lines and the dot painting work.
Whistle.
students were asked to transform their map using a lighter coloured pencil so it could be seen up on the dark background. So I already had a map in mind. I have a favourite place I go walking, which is Morietta Falls. I've been walking there since a young child. So I showed them a rough idea of how I'd transform my map. So in my map, my 10 symbols were, the first one was the car park area where you first come into the falls. So I had that drawn as a white piece. I then had the first fall coming down as a series of lines, and the second fall coming down as a series of lines here, and then I had the third fall up above. Some of my other symbols were the bridges from the car park across to the path. There's obviously a series of bridges coming if you take the bottom trail in from the car park through to the first waterfall. It's dissected by bridges as you're crossing. I had the toilet block marked next to the car park as one of my icons, and then I also had various places as you trail the paths up. The paths themselves obviously are one symbol and one icon, but as the paths meander they change shape obviously, but there's significant spots in the paths as they come up in behind to the various falls. So on this particular side, this path here, there's a lookout that overhangs the path. So I had that marked on there as a symbol, and there was another lookout that I had a different symbol because there's no actual platform, it's just a rail that you lean against, where you come up from behind the toilet path and climb the hill. There's two significant points. One is this point here, which is where the first time I ever came up here with a guide, so that now this was the highest point above sea level from the Adelaide Plains, which has just always stuck in my mind. And you could climb down and sit on the rocks. There's an overhang and just look out over the whole gorge and back to the city. That's the last chance you see the city. And then from here, the trail continues to meander, where you then get, as you're getting closer to the first fall, there's another, as I said, that rail lookout. That's just a rail. So I just had a slightly thicker line here, and you can look out. I put some binocular shape type things in there to show. Here you can see the first fall, and you can also see up to the second fall. It's the first time you get to see the second fall. This path then continues on one of two routes. You can either come down behind the first falls and across a bridge, or you continue off up until you get to the second fall. And from there you can take another path which takes you up to the third fall. And I could have put a lot more icons in, but I wanted to stick to the 10 that were in the rubric. So I put them onto the map in light pencil first, so I can then show the students how I use line work to show the trails and the various things, and then from there how we then start dot painting. Okay, so by using some different colours, different tones and different widths of brush stroke prior to dot painting was one option that the students had to outline some of the icons that they'd used. Here I'm just measuring out the path, the walking trail at Morietta. So once I change paths to the second and third fall, the lines might even get thinner. In order to get consistent dots, it's important to keep loading up the stick. So the best way is to just dip the stick into the surface of the paint, so you get this even dot underneath that will then transfer to the painting very well. Quite often you'll only get 1 or 2 dots at the most. Okay, upon reflection of this dot painting unit, there are a few things that are presented as difficulties. One was the rate at which the different students could do the dot painting. Some were finished their second dot painting while others were still trying to complete their first. So it's important to have on hand the next activity ready to go on with for those that are a bit quicker. I could have also have changed the size of the sticks to be a little bit smaller. Certainly would have helped quite considerably, I think, especially for the students that were more capable. They could use a slightly smaller dot. Some did choose to use bamboo skewers, but it was sort of intermittent amongst the paintings that they're already doing. So I would have included into the rubric, as I had with the dot painting, that the dot painting in the rubric stated that the dots needed to be consistent and evenly spaced, so the students took time and care with the paint and placing the dots. If I had had something similar in the rubric about the drawing, it certainly would have helped the overall outcome. But as you can see from the preceding pictures, they certainly produced some great results that were very significant to them and their lives.